And welcome back to the Net.LOL podcast. We are joined today by one of the most intrepid analysts that Silicon Valley has produced over the past decade. He's everywhere. He's always been everywhere. He's been on SDN since the beginning. On top of that, he's a great guy. Let's welcome Roy Chua of AvidThink, head analyst, principal analyst, and founder of AvidThink, a new shop coming around. It's great talking to Roy because Roy knows where all the bodies are buried, and he's always on top of the latest news. So what's up, Roy? What's going on, man?
Hey, Brian, it's been a while. Thanks for having me, and it's always good to see you and Tom and Dave and Carl. It's been a while. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's the usual, and as you indicated, yeah, I run a small analyst from AvidThink, and you guys may know it a little better. Originally, as part of SDX Central, we used to be part of the research group at SDX Central, which I co-founded back in 2012, long time ago, when Nicira was bought by VMware that same year, which made things very exciting for SDN.
Oh yes,
this is many years later. It's going to be almost 10 years later, right? Soon, actually. Yeah, it's been a while since you guys were teenagers, right? So excellent. So everything anyway. So AvidThink is a research firm. We're an analyst firm. We cover infrastructure technologies as we always have, and as you guys say, SDN, then NFV, SD-WAN, SASE, edge computing, 5G, IoT. So those are the things that we tend to cover. All the things that get virtualized, things that get containerized and cloudified, which are all not words, but they are, and we touch those. So yeah, glad to be here.
Nice, man.
Interesting stuff as usual.
Yeah, and as always, joined by Tom, Dave, and Kyle. What's up, guys? So Roy, I know we're going to touch on 5G, and then we might even go into one of the bigger. I don't even know what I'd call Web3 right now. If there are kids in the room, I probably won't say it.
I believe the term you're looking for is dumpster fire.
Yeah. Dumpster fire. That's
web-based dumpster fire.
The clean version.
Distributed dumpster fire.
Distributed dumpster fire.
Distributed dumpster fire.
Decentralized dumpster fire.
Cloud native dumpster fire. I think we can make T-shirts out of that.
Right. So, Roy, before we get started with those, what's exciting you right now in technology? What's front and foremost on your radar?
Yeah, so what we're seeing a lot of interest in from the enterprises and the service providers is this whole desire to grab the next move in cloud, and along with that, 5G, IoT, edge computing, right? So that's what the carriers and the enterprises are looking at from a communication standpoint. And so they're hoping that the 5G build out and the restructuring of their core and will bring new innovation, right? As if you just roll out, new RF, you roll out new radios, you roll out new transport, and magically, something happens. I think we're still waiting for that magic. It's not clear what that magic is. But there is hope because we changed the infrastructure again. So with every change comes opportunities, presumably, if you can capture them, right? So that's part of what we're seeing. And along with 5G is the edge thing, the private 5G in enterprise, right? Where you too can have cellular in your home, right? Your own network, right?
That's the question, right?
Yeah.
Around 5G, right? Is the way it's being built out, it looks like a broadband build out being built ahead of what you said, like hoping for revenue or whatever. But what's your take on that? I mean, is private 5G going to save the party, or is what? Because it seems like it's.
Yeah. I think the question is, so we step back and say, what is 5G? So 5G is a set of standards, right, in terms of evolution of the radio network and then the transport and the core, right? That's what it is. It's a collection of technologies and standards that is supposed to make our life better. And inside 5G, and as work, 3GPP sort of coming together and making the standards, there are elements in there that are supposed to address the concerns that we have with past cellular networks, right? So you want more capacity, sure, we'll give it to you. You want lower latency, we'll give it to you, right? You want massively more items on that network, sure, we'll give that to you as well. And we'll give you combinations in between. Plus, we're going to modernize the backend of it so that we can say we're cloud and containerized and microservices. So it's all the catchphrases, check, right? So we can get all that. We're supposed to give you scalability, resiliency, and all the good stuff that you guys know all about, right? That's the dream of what.
But after all that, they're still charging the same amount. So it's just like the
That's the
broadband
problem.
story, right?
That is the problem. The problem is that the ARPU hasn't gone up significantly, right? And
After
we all have
all that,
5G.
it's
After
still
all that,
$99 a month or whatever it is, right?
well, yeah, I mean, ARPU is actually for commercial ARPU, generally speaking, in the US, we're looking at, $30 a phone, $40 a phone a month, right? And for consumers, you're trying to drive that a little higher. And so you play tricks like bundling, Netflix with that, HBO Max with that. And so you play that game, but you are correct. Essentially, the ARPU hasn't gone up. Not really. Not worldwide. Not, so, I mean, in Korea, we've seen a little bit of improvement in that, but it's not. See, generally speaking, it's not ARPU going up. It's just ARPU not declining as fast, right? So 5G is ARPU, decline stopper, right? I think that's one way to look at it. And okay, maybe that's great, maybe that's good, but the reality is that we haven't seen any, I would say, very compelling 5G applications today in the public macro network, with maybe one exception. And the one exception I'll give is the fixed wireless access, or 5G FWA, right, which is using that broadband infrastructure. Again, you're right,
That
Tom.
had some uptake in 4G as well, right?
It did.
We had,
It did. It did.
little
In fact, it's
boxes
waking
people
up.
get.
That's correct.
Yep.
5G has woken up some of the 4G late stage adoption, right, which is broadband access. And there is a cost effectiveness to wireless, right? Ship them on a box, turn it on, and magically you get it 100 megabits down or 60 megabits down, 10, 30, 50 up, depending on where you are. And then with C-band deployment, enough capacity, hopefully you get 300 down and 50 up or 100 up, which is not bad, right? For
And
50
consistently without a lot of packet loss. That was the other problem.
Well, and I was going to say, though, that's, as a consumer, that's the thing that excites me about 5G.
That's right.
Because I don't, in my municipality, I don't have any options other than Comcast, right? And that's it. There's nothing else to compete.
Right.
And so from a consumer perspective, and so what is your take on that, Roy? Do you think that could actually happen and this could help people?
I think it could. So that's the one I give for 5G slash 4G LTE build out, right? Which is, I'm using that. So like Carl, I have DSL, okay, at $65 a month, 50 down, 10 up. Why would I pay for that, right?
Yep.
Or I have Comcast, right? So I get 1.4 down and 30 up. And whenever I run speed test, I get 1.4 down. Whenever I run WebEx or Zoom or whatever it is, I get packet loss. I don't know why, right? But doesn't matter. I get 1.4 down when I run speed test.
We can talk about why in a minute,
so
I know why, and it's a pain in the neck.
So I do have fixed wireless access. So I am using fixed wireless access. I'm getting about 70, 80 down, and I get 30 to 40 up for 60 a month. That's not bad. So that's my backup line. So my SD-WAN cheap, my DIY SD-WAN at home, I have that as my backup. And it works great. Better than DSL, cheaper than DSL. Plus, when I travel, when I was then down in NWCLA and was trying to do a webinar remotely, I brought my little router with me. I put it up there, and it was great. That was reliable. It actually works. So yes, fixed wireless access with 5G, when you can get 5G that higher capacity midband, it's actually pretty sweet. So I would say
interesting.
Yes.
And I wonder if that's going to push, fixed broadband to the next, we're already seeing it like in my area.
Mm-hmm.
They're rolling out gigabit fiber everywhere. The vestiges of what Verizon left when they took off and left, the 3 states here to figure out whatever. And it's really interesting because they're offering gigabit Ethernet here for $50 a month, up and down.
I'm really happy for you, Tom. That's great, because in my area I've got a pair of copper going in my house. So this is what pisses me off about the 5G discussion is people that have 5G discussions are sitting in big cities sitting on fiber. If people were sitting on a pair of copper, they might not be as thrilled about the prospects of never getting fiber to the curb.
Yeah.
Right. I just think it's such part of me like okay, so 20 years ago, Ray Kurzweil, the noted futurist, right? He said everything that was wired would go wireless, everything that's wireless would go wired, and so we are seeing that trend. But at the same time, it just feels like we're kind of punting on the problem of actually building out infrastructure, particularly in the U.S., right? When we compare
That's
it to
fair. That's
South
correct.
Korea,
That's correct.
basically not as geographically constrained, but you're always we're always going to get better performance and future proofed, via hardwire. But maybe I'm just being a luddite. In that sense.
So fiber build out is critical to the future of the infrastructure in this country and most countries. I think
Even
we
for
recognize
5G, you got to build
even
out
for
fiber
5G.
to the
That's correct.
towers. I mean,
That is
microwave
correct.
backhaul isn't going to take you far with 5G.
That's correct. Fundamentally, fiber build out has to continue. So we know that. I think that's fundamental. And you are correct. The rural areas, even with RDOF, right, all the funds that have been made available, we're still trying. And fiber needs to get to rural. I think that's no. Now 5G. So I do have a friend in Montana, who's got some, and he's seeing better coverage with 5G. So especially the mid band, right? When the mid band C bands come in with 5G, you can get. He's like, I get 100 down. It's not bad, right? For where he is, he's happy, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And I think hopefully one day it comes to you, Brent. If not, then maybe get Tom, to come in with a backhoe and just.
Well, I have the same thing.
He's got one, as a matter of fact.
I have the
He has
same
a
problem
backhoe.
with my farm, and yeah, but I have to say, and there's an interesting thing going on right now. The town is trying to renew its cable franchise with, and I won't mention who it is, but it's not, it's one of the big ones. But anyway, what's interesting is the discussion has pivoted rapidly as soon as fiber has become available, because you can get gigabit for $50. There was even a discussion about 5G and wireless. We're right near the highway, right there. There's 2 towers. You can get good 5G bandwidth. But it's kind of like, Brent was saying, as soon as fiber shows up, the game's over. If they can figure out how to make it work money-wise, and that's always been the impediment. Even when I was at BT, we're trying to run fiber everywhere, and they said, it's too expensive to run. If you got to run it more than 100 yards to get to the user, you suddenly fall off the price cliff.
There is nothing that makes me more nervous than seeing a guy with a backhoe in the road, and some cones appearing, because I know that whatever he's doing, whether it's whatever utility, he's going to hit a phone cable, and my DSL is going to go down.
DSL is done.
Yep.
And that's the problem with running all of these utilities co-located or not very well marked, and that's where something like 5G, at least with decent FWA, would be great, because then we don't have that level of disruption, which for your average consumer, right, who's going to bother having an SD-WAN based 5G backup, because that's hard work. Right?
No, it works for me. I mean, when my Comcast goes down, and it does, that FWA is there to pick it up, and it's good enough, right? Even for conferencing and all that, I don't even notice it. The firewall just switches over, and I'm back up and running, and it's good enough. I mean, it's not great, right? I mean, 80 to 100 down is not great, but it's good enough.
It's
right?
better than zero.
It's better than 0 down, and 30 to 40 up is good, and it's good, and it's more convenient than I mean, we all have phones. We can always hotspot tether, right? It's a different world. It's not like you're dead in the water. You just take out your phone and you just tether and everything's back up. But just the convenience of having a centralized system that's FWA that works with a router and all your firewall rules and everything's still working great. It's very convenient. I can say
it's
that
the
when
seamlessness.
It is. It is. When I went from DSL to 5G, actually it's 4G LTE, fixed wireless access. It's not bad. I was happy. $50 a month. I mean, why
it's
not?
It's just on. You can pick it up and move it.
I can move it anywhere, as I did. I've taken it down to LA. I've taken it to different places, that little modem.
Yeah.
I can put 2 SIMs into it. So I even have cellular backup from 2 carriers if I want, right? I've done that. It's great.
Yeah.
I forced
or if you go to Europe or something or wherever, you get a local SIM.
That's correct. Local SIM, you put it in, and that little modem, that little router, right? Actually,
nothing
works.
changes. Yeah.
No.
That's cool.
So I think
the agility too, I think, is something that's important for enterprises, right? I mean, normally leased lines, you're looking at 6 months.
That's correct.
If you have leverage on the provider
That's
now.
correct.
Well, think
You're
about things like
basically overnighting.
M&A,
Yeah.
M&A or expansion of, you
It's
build another factory or something.
No, it's
You can
great.
be
So
online pretty quick. You don't have to wait for
you can.
fiber build out and
You
whatever.
can. In fact, in our work with SD-WAN providers, right, and the carriers, the using 5G or 4G LTE to bootstrap SD-WAN is actually a favorite use case, right? Because what happens is you ship it out there and it's up right away. You know it's
It
up.
just works. Yeah.
It just works. And then when the fixed line comes in, if something wrong with the fixed line, you can troubleshoot it remotely. But in the meantime, you have connectivity. And for retail, with pop-up retail and stores moving around, especially with seasonal things, that actually works. So back to 5G use case.
That's a good point. Food
Actually,
trucks were using that. I've seen that.
That's correct. They are.
Yeah.
They are. They're using that. That's right. So fixed wireless access, I don't know whether it's a killer app or not, but I think it's a compelling app that people are willing to pay for that's additional to your mobile phone. That's a service that works. And I'm using it. So fixed wireless access, I'm using it. A lot of people I know are using it. Enterprises are. SD-WAN, they're using that as a bootstrap. It's great.
Yeah, and see, that's a real compelling reason for me, other than wow, it's new and it's cool or whatever, right? It's
Yeah.
got real practical benefits
It
over
does.
a fixed
It
line
does.
setup.
It does. And
Well,
5G,
how,
yeah, it gives you spectrum efficiency, right? So you get spectrum efficiency, you get presumably some power efficiency, you get some scalability on the back end, right? Potentially as part of the infrastructure upgrade. So I think
Yeah.
that part is real. But all the hype stuff and all the rest, I think that we're doing ourselves a disservice as
It's
an
tough
industry.
to. We did this with 4G too. It's a kind of thing that SE3GPP, all that stuff.
Well, we keep doing it to ourselves.
You know,
I mean,
we
look, we did it ourselves with SDN. We did it ourselves with NFV. I mean, come on.
yeah.
Right,
I mean,
right,
it's
right.
way
True.
over rotating, and then what do we do? I've got a magazine here I got sent that's got 85% of this thing is all that hype, like wow, augmented reality and all of this stuff, which is great if we can get that to work, but these are weird motivators for a new
They are weird motivators.
network
Yeah,
technology.
I agree. I agree. We're making up reasons as to why we need it as opposed to trying to solve real problems that
We're
we have
making
today.
problems up that
Yeah.
we don't need to, right?
That's correct. That's correct.
Oh, cool.
I think so. Kyle brings up kind of the competitive point too. I think it's important that there are actual alternatives, even if they are just wireless. It's going to put pressure on like traditional CLECs and ILECs out there to actually build out infrastructure if they want to compete. So maybe
Well, that's the example in my area. They're 4G has been eating their lunch because they're still on DSL from 1970 around here,
right.
and maybe not quite as bad as where you are, but. And they realized like they were losing subscribers like to the 100,000 a quarter kind of levels, these kinds of things, and there aren't that many people around here. So they were rapidly going to get zero revenue, and so they needed to kick it up and compete. So that you're right. It really
It's a good thing. It's a good
that's
thing.
an interesting
Good
feature.
thing. I mean, the cable companies with DOCSIS, now we're down to like 4 gigs speeds, right? And I think the competition is important. I'm waiting for fiber here. I mean, it's supposed to be, it's just one town over right now. And I'm like, come on, like just take that back home and just come
That's always
down
the
this
irony
way.
of where you live. You
And
live
now
in
that I fixed wireless, it doesn't matter. You can take out the network. I still have backup, right?
still have backup.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Back
where
to
does
days.
like geostationary Starlink does
It
that
plays a
disrupt
role.
5G?
Yeah, I think it does a little bit, right? So the low Earth orbit, the LEOs, right? I think they serve a purpose, especially in areas where it's expensive and hard to get to. They do, and there are a lot of places in the world where you can't get fiber, and even that build out. I mean, as Tom was saying, you still need fiber for the towers. At the end of the day, you still need to dig, right? And so the LEOs, I think, play a role as well. And I think so. I don't get it here. I actually checked, but I can't get that service here. So if I did, I might have switched from DSL to that. So I
I know a
think
few people that have it. They're
Mhm.
like up, Montana, Idaho thing.
Yeah.
It works okay because the low Earth orbit, this is the difference, like with the DirecTV options and all that, you get
hmm
way less latency, because they're way lower.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah,
bandwidth
and
is
it's
all
not
right.
variable
It's like,
wire.
like you're saying, 50 down or whatever, 50 up.
Yeah, it's not bad. I mean,
No,
with
no.
about 20 to 30 millisecond latency is livable. You don't
Yeah.
need 5, 6, 7 millisecond latency for the most part, right? Unless you're a gamer and you really need to win, right? But other than that,
Even the people I know are streaming Netflix over that, and
yeah,
it works all right.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's good.
Starlink's doing 250 meg like pretty
Hmm.
regularly, so that's pretty interesting.
It
Yeah.
is. It is interesting. It is
Every
interesting.
time people mention Starlink, I always remember seeing this image of cats all huddled into the dish because they realize that there's a small
Yeah,
amount of warmth
right.
that gets
It's
given
warm.
off there.
That's right. And apparently, it doesn't affect the signal too badly. Apparently, at
Well,
least.
that's good to know.
It's
It
We
still
get a warm
works.
place with the cats, and
Yes.
I still get.
In fact, the idea, Dave, that would be to actually have a dish that does nothing, it just stays warm for the cats, and sell it to pet lovers. That's
There's
Attach
your
the
killer
dish
app.
to the cat. Let him walk around with the dish on there. Yeah.
yeah. That's the mobile option, Tom. That's for
That could
extra
just be the
$35.
next YouTube sensation right there.
You never know.
Satellite cats.
You never know. But I think in the macro, back to the macro market, 5G fixed wireless access is a real thing. I think that makes sense.
Hmm.
And I think until we get to network slicing or the ability to split up macro for enterprise use case, for the time being, I think that's it. The AR VR stuff I think is still too early. We're still in the process of doing that. And the 5G networks have mixed performance worldwide, so it's hard. It's not consistent, which is the problem. Which is any kind of infrastructure upgrades, it takes time. And you go, okay, I got a 5G signal, but wait, I can't download pages, right? Because yeah, your core hasn't been upgraded, your core sucks, right? And I have had that experience. I will get 5G mid-band, ultra capacity, ultra wide, whatever it is, and then the pages don't load. I switch back to LTE, and all of a sudden it loads. I'm like, oh, look, there's a problem with the core, right? It's not the radio, it's the core, right? So it takes time to get there, and until they get to the consistency, people are like, yeah, okay, but it's not guaranteed. So why would I switch to that? Enterprises wouldn't for sure. And so that leads us to that private 5G discussion, which is, oh, is cellular so great in the macro? Maybe we could use it, in our enterprises. And there are quite a few now, right? I think, if you believe the vendors, then, some of them are getting very good traction. Like I think Nokia is up to like 270, 300 enterprises worldwide that have adopted their private solutions. Not always 5G, by the way. About 70, 80% of those are actually 4G LTE networks, not 5G.
The interesting thing those guys are doing, not specifically, but the traditional
in
mobile
general.
operators. Well, let's just say, so I don't specifically talk about anybody, but
Right.
you can see they're all figuring out how to be. Your example of your MIMO box or whatever it's called for 4G remote tethering, they're basically using that with 5G and combining it with Wi-Fi. So it's basically what you have, but the footprint is really the key, right?
That's correct.
It can plug into your local broadband or your local LAN, and then it has two radios on it, 5G radio, Wi-Fi radio, and it's a little box. It's like the size of a shoebox. You stick it on the wall and plug it in, and you're done. And factory online, and it works. And that's really super compelling because factories don't have an IT operator there on site. And then what do you got to do? I mean, a friend of mine does mechanical engineering down in New Jersey with things like this, and it's like a year-long project to outfit one of these things.
Right.
But imagine if you just show up, stick a box on the wall, plug it in, off you go.
Right. Yeah, and 5G plays a role two ways. That one is the macro, the WAN connectivity side of things, which makes it really convenient, an SD-WAN type use case. The other one is the broadcasting a private 5G signal locally or 4G LTE, which gives you certain benefits. And so what we've been seeing, and we've worked with some of the vendors in the space here as well, and the carriers, is the use of cellular technologies within the factories and in metal dense environments or in places where it's kind of hard to reach. What in our work with the vendors, what we're seeing is a 4x coverage, from one access point or radio, right, radio unit, 4x coverage indoors and 10x outdoors. And so you get better coverage with cellular technologies than you do with Wi-Fi, at least until 6E we'll figure out. But generally speaking, it's 4x indoors and 10x outdoors, and so it's quite compelling for shipping ports. It's quite.
That's what I mean. You literally need one box.
Exactly.
You stick it to the wall and everybody works.
Good.
And then you do your 5G off under the covers.
That's right. That's right. And it's quite nice. The only caveat is your devices have to support it. So in the US,
Yep.
we have the shared license CBRS, right? And there's unlicensed or 5G unlicensed in other places, right? And there's other options for unlicensed, shared license, enterprise license if you're in
Yeah, lower
Japan.
power, localized. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And in Germany, you can get a license. I actually looked it up. It was actually quite cheap to get your own enterprise license, right? For
Yeah, we're
Spectrum.
doing a thing
Yeah,
around that in Germany too, and
yeah,
and in the
correct.
US too. It's not that
Yeah.
hard to get low power licenses.
No, it's not. CBRS shared license, it's relatively straightforward. You can get
Yep.
it installed, certified, and bring it up really, really quickly. And it's nice. But the devices, either you have to use a modem, right? Cellular modem that will do the switching, right? Ethernet to cellular. Or you have to have the device supported. Like, most of the iPhones will do CBRS, right? And you can turn it on and you can do that. And all the new devices coming online do CBRS in the US. And that's actually been a big market. And so
That's super cool.
it is super cool. And the carriers are looking at trying to make money from that. The unfortunate thing is that the early rollouts, most of them are carrier free. In other words, they don't have the carrier involved. So
Right.
the system integrators, so the SIs come in and say, hey,
They
we'll can
add
do it
them
for you.
after. Yeah.
Exactly. And you don't need a carrier because most of the early use cases are a truly private network with no public mobility option because sitting in the factory or sitting in the hospital, right?
Well, the interesting thing about the carrier option is that they handle some of the operational stuff. For example, the
That's
authentication. You get an
yeah.
enterprise license for your
Mhm.
phones.
Mhm.
It's the same auth over there. They just
Yep,
add another SIM to your record and you
that's correct.
authenticate and
Yeah.
off you go.
That's right. So they can
That's
manage
really interesting.
subscriber. Yeah. So you are right that the carriers can add value by managing the network for you. The subscriber identity management part of it is certainly a big thing, and that I think you're touching on a part which they're still working through, which is in the old days when we do Wi-Fi, not old days, but even today we do Wi-Fi. Right, your Wi-Fi authenticates, right? Get a real radio server that talks to your,
That's not
AD,
easy to set
talks
up
to your
though.
LDAP and all that's not. Believe me, I started the company in that space, right? So a long time ago, right?
Yeah.
802.1x, right? So I know all the E types and all those things. I can go into detail. Pain in the ass. Anyhow,
Oh yeah.
that aside, that aside, um, that aside, I think a lot of the private 5G or 4G guys that are coming in are coming in. A lot of them come in from the carrier side, so they're used to like big macro networks, right? Diameter, you got all subscriber management, your HSS, HLR, all this, and all of a sudden you hit the enterprise, and the enterprise says, "I got AD." They're like, "What? You got what?" Right? And
Yeah.
so in the Wi-Fi world, we figured it out. And by the way, the IT guy or the IT gal sitting in the enterprise expects when it comes off the AP, you're on the LAN, so I can touch it and control it.
Yep.
They're like, what core, what EPC, what 5GC?
Yeah, that's a
What, you
good
mean
point
your
too.
edge,
Is
right?
AD is not integrated with, so then
No,
you've got a whole
that's
IT
right. So where does the
investment.
SIM go? Right. How do you manage the SIM? How do you
Yeah.
tie to the identity of the device? How do you ensure that you have the right device identity, whether it's the SIM sitting on the box or, the Wi-Fi MAC, with the Wi-Fi radio sitting on the device, right? How do you
Yep.
unify identity, your privilege, and all those things? So some of the early stage private 5G, 4G LTE companies that are coming in are trying to bridge that. They're trying to make it as easy as, pick your favorite, Aruba, Meraki, all those vendors, right? Juniper Mist, whatever. Pick your favorite Wi-Fi vendor. Try to make it as easy as that Wi-Fi deployment. So it's like a one-button cloud manage, type thing. And back to what you were saying, I think the unification of Wi-Fi and 5G LTE could be very interesting in terms of how you do that. And
Yeah.
in fact, TIP, the Telecom Infra Project, they actually have it was a pilot project to demonstrate, this was actually quite interesting, to demonstrate running over existing infrastructure, so Ethernet infrastructure,
Yep.
so structured cabling, both signals going through with a unified radio. So broadcasting Wi-Fi, and I think in this case,
Oh
it was a
yeah.
sub-6
Kind of like
signal.
Wi-Fi calling. It's
Yeah,
just
both.
yeah,
Except that
but
actually,
it's
you
both.
actually have a signal. You have both signals coming out the same radio
Yeah.
over the same structured cabling, back to two separate head ends, right? So they're multiplexing the RF signal over that structured cabling, sub-6 gig, right? So it's quite interesting. So
Yeah.
these are early experiments in terms of what is Wi-Fi, 5G, 4G, and the reality when we talk to enterprises, and these are some of the Fortune 50s, is they will have both. They're not going to pick one or the other because it's not dictated by you. It's dictated by the devices that you have in your network, which you don't
Right.
always control. And the
Which most
devices
of our Wi-Fi is still,
today,
right now,
exactly.
and that's
Yeah,
not going to change.
it's not going to change, not easily, because the 5G and 4G radios are going to be 10x the Wi-Fi radio cost today. I mean, we have it
Yeah.
so cheap. I mean, everything's Wi-Fi enabled, right? I mean, your toothbrush is Wi-Fi enabled, your
Right.
mug is Wi-Fi enabled, I mean, come on, right? So, and your 5G radio is not going to be anywhere close to cheap enough for now, right? For a
Not for a
long time,
while. Yeah.
for
Yeah,
a
you're
long
right.
time. So,
But that's
so
also one way to do like the way I've actually thought of what we were talking about recently. I thought maybe that's the way you can actually do 5G as a service.
mhm,
You can own it, you can operate 5G on behalf of an enterprise that
yeah,
way.
yeah,
It's
you can.
and you can glue it into their existing infrastructure if you need to. But
That's right.
that's
That's right.
that's like the
That's right.
integrator
It
or
is the
SP's
integrator OC.
problem.
That's exactly. Then the problem right there is that integrators are good at it, right?
Yeah.
Not all carriers are, right? And that's therein lies the challenge for the carriers, which is they say, look, we are, the kings and queens of 5G, and therefore we should be the ones to take it in an enterprise. But enterprise is saying, well, I'm not sure I need you right now, right? Which is the
Yeah.
problem, right? So you got to show me how you add value to me before I let you in.
But
And
that's
then
actually one way that the carriers can actually monetize this adventure.
that is correct.
That
That is
that's
correct. And I can tell you, and I'll
actually
work with
like I can
carriers.
see it working,
Yeah, yeah,
like it's
Well,
yeah.
not
they
like
would need to.
augmented reality in quotes or something. It's what we just talked about. I mean, yeah, somebody could pay for that and it
Well,
would make sense.
and if they were smart, they'd realize that the integrators are taking a cut here, right? By trying,
They
they
are.
would say,
They are.
well, wait a sec, we'll give you like you're saying, Tom. We as the carrier will do all of that integration for you and tie it
Yeah,
all
then
up
they
with a
can
bow, and here
compete
it
and
is.
all
And
that.
so
Yeah.
it's they're gonna have to do that. I think otherwise
They have to.
they're
They
gonna be
have to.
buried, right? They'll be
That's
buried
correct.
by the integrators.
That's correct. It's a threat to them, and you're absolutely right, Carl. So we've worked with different carriers and we've seen different plans, which is fundamentally it is in the carrier's interest to drive mobility use cases because they own a macro network, and so they have to come up with use cases where mobility, so transitioning between the macro and the private network is a real business problem. So you got to come up with that, which makes sense. The other thing that they could do, and we've said to the carriers, just make it really, really easy, right? I mean, just be aggressive about it and say, look,
That's
tell
the
you what,
key.
yeah, why don't we just turn on 5G for you free? We'll just come in, we'll put the the little small cells, or we'll put a DAS system in there, by the way, free.
Yep.
And all I want is I want you to sign on with me as a corporate customer, and you get
Yep.
$5, everyone's happy.
Yep.
Plus, I'll run your private network for you over the same infrastructure, and so your equipment, and everything else, can get on, right? I think that kind of aggressive thinking is probably required to say,
Well, it's
I'll be,
required too for anything that's not like a large enterprise that doesn't have a real IT department. I mean, especially when you go Soho, but I mean, even mid-sized enterprises,
mid-sized enterprises don't want to deal with that. You're absolutely right.
can deal with that.
So you can
Yeah.
say, if I sign up with my favorite carrier, I get, I get what they call corporate lines, right? I get corporate liable lines, on that, and so everyone's covered in mobility. Plus, I get free coverage. I mean, not free, but it's pay as you go, right? For all the devices and industrial devices I have in my factories. Why
I
not?
think this is the play too that you see the cable operators now making plays
Uh-huh.
for MVNO, and
They are.
that's
Yes, they are.
really what's behind it. I think is they want to combine these things together and
They
make
do.
it
They
easy.
do.
You know.
They do, and a lot of them invested into SD-WAN. Some of them invested into edge computing, right? So yes, everyone has interest in that, in taking more revenues from the corporate enterprise in terms of local coverage, in terms of macro coverage, right? As well as some of them want to take a slice of your computing and applications tied to your network as well, right? That's what they're all looking at from a carrier's perspective. Carrier, CSP, right? The MSOs, the carriers and other alternative providers. They're all looking at the game. It's an interesting game.
It's an interesting game right now. We'll see how
It
they
is.
monetize it.
Oh, it is. And the 5G
And
infrastructure is very interesting. Even the colo guys are coming in. The Equinixes of the world are stepping in and wanting to help, right? Why not?
I mean, you mentioned Edge a couple of times, Roy, and I'm really curious as to see whether, like, if I was an enterprise right now, is there a driving force for me to be really thinking about edge computing? Is there that killer app that's going to push me towards, 5G and then running stuff at the carrier edge, or is there, where do you see that evolving?
Yeah, so we work with different clients on edge computing. We actually work with some of the hyperscalers as well, and the carriers. And it's kind of interesting, sort of being stuck in between the two, depending on the week or the month that we're working with, and the server manufacturers too, right? So we have clients all in that. So you sort of see from all the 3 or 4 angles, right? Um, I would say that edge computing. I think if you look at it, right, we've had edge computing for a while. It's the computer room that you had, the server room you had on site, that's edge computing, except that it wasn't, centrally controlled. It didn't have a standard, cloud platform on it, right, standardized. So, so that is edge computing from, eons ago, right? But fundamentally, I would say that we do see enterprises moving the on-premises infrastructure to a cloud control, just like we did with Wi-Fi, right? So the cloud control orchestration, I think there is value in the centralization, that standardization.
This back to the operations thing that we were just talking about. Enterprises, a lot of us geeks don't realize how slim IT departments are at most
That's right.
enterprises.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. They've been cut
This
and they
stuff
haven't
is like
grown.
rocket science. So like, I don't know,
Right.
I don't know how to hook
That's right.
this stuff up.
That's correct. And so if you have a box that you can plug in, talks to the cloud, and comes right up, right? I think that makes sense on premises. And there are still a lot of workloads that have to be on premises, right? For latency reasons, for privacy or compliance reasons, they have to be on premises. So I see edge computing for the enterprises as on premises sort of cloud control management plane, like SDN, right? Makes sense. Data plane, computing plane stays on premises, and the data stays there, the management of that stays there. I think that makes sense. So we're seeing that happening right now. And in use cases where you have a wired network that's kind of fixed and you want to upgrade it, and private 5G comes along and says, hey, we can give you more cost effectiveness and higher agility, healthcare or industrial, tied to the computing platform, that's where we're seeing uptake, right? And we're seeing like real world use cases at factories, at ports and all that. That's actually coming up. So we're seeing that.
Interesting.
The edge computing, where it comes into your either on the other side of a fiber connection or on the other side of a wireless connection, so the network edge or the metro edge computing, that's still a little early. So we're seeing some use cases coming up, and some of the early ones in there are offloading local compute. Like for instance, in LA, where you have a lot of studios, they offload the actual rendering into local sort of metro clouds where you can share. So that makes sense, right? You need the low latency, but yet you do that. So in some industries, some of that makes sense. We're seeing a little bit of that. In some situations in retail, and that one I'm not so bought into yet, because like point of sale services and all that is not very computing sensitive, right? You can run, low-time CPU will do it for you. But if you're doing things like smart mirrors or personalization or something like that, then you could imagine retail stores using 5G, so public 5G, right? Running some of the compute in the metro areas, right? And so you can move the stores around, pop-up stores and all that. Supports use cases like that. Or in medicine, right, where you set up field camps or field clinics and you have to do diagnostics, ultrasound diagnostics and, assisted stuff. Makes sense. That
makes a lot of sense. Yeah, you can. And you need a lot of bandwidth for those too.
That's correct. That's correct. And then the other one we're seeing is basically AR, events, right? So sports, concerts, augmentation of the experience, right? Using, because these are one-off things, right? You don't run it every day, right? You run it maybe once a week.
A special event like the Super Bowl or something.
Exactly. And so edge computing, bringing it with low latency in those cases, bring compute low latency over a fast network, those we're seeing make sense. So we're seeing some of those use cases early on. And then eventually, when you get fast enough and you can do, automotive use cases, not self-driving. Okay, again, not self-driving.
Yeah, that's different.
Autonomous vehicles are autonomous. You cut the network, they still run. They're autonomous. But things that are added to that, HD maps, right? Sort of local, like the pothole is in lane number 3, 10 centimeters from the edge of the road, whatever. So that kind of detailed stuff, real time, yes. Vulnerable road user, when you're making a turn, there's a user there, they spot a pedestrian and say slow down, right? Those, yes, but that not pervasive enough yet. But I think but those are real use cases, like real world benefits, not all the stuff that we see about, like remote surgery and no, come on, that.
Well, that's a bit too far out, but.
Remote diagnostics, yes, right? Yeah.
That's great. Well, Roy, we're out of time, so we're gonna try and con you into coming back, and we'll get into some Web3. So
Happy
where
to
where
talk
can
about
folks
that.
find you and get in touch with you, man?
Yeah, sure. So avidthink.com, avidthink.com is probably the best way to find our stuff in there, and you'll see our reports and our clients, and we have some cool videos that we do with the partner as well on next gen infrastructure. So welcome
Cool.
to find us there. Yeah, and
Awesome.
Please check
Great.
that out.
Thank you so
thank you
much.
guys.
And
Thanks for being
guys, guys and gals, appreciate your time listening today. Drop us a line if you want to jump on the show or have some topics you want to hear about. And yeah, everybody have a great day and
on.
evening. Take care.
Take
See
care.
you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.